Hello, this is Wahkeena Sitka and Shanti Bear coming to say hello to you. Yes, Shanti is the cutest cutie pie ever, and I just wanted her to say hello. Shanti Bear. So, this is Wahkeena Sitka, and I am going to share. Wow! I'm going to share another visionary story with you. I've really been meditating on this and really thinking about what stories do I want to share, because I have quite a lot of stories, but there are definitely a few that really stand out, and the story that I feel like sharing with you right now is definitely one that is one of my most profound, most sacred, most treasured life experiences that I've ever had up to this point. And for me, it truly was and is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I am infinitely grateful for this one experience that I'm about to share with you, because it lives in my heart forever. This is like an eternal flame of love, and I think about this experience even somewhat regularly because it created a profound shift in my life. It created a profound realization, and I will share all that with you just momentarily. So this experience was facilitated through the use of the entheogenic medicine known as acid, or LSD. This was about 6 years ago, and I would say I've done acid just probably no more than like 5 times, maybe 4 or 5 times. It's been a pretty scant amount of use of the LSD, but it was definitely by far my most amazing experience with acid, and remains in my life a very, very, very treasured memory. So it happened in the very beginning of 2005, and it was with my now ex-boyfriend, Matthew. We shared this experience together, and we basically created a tantric sexual ritual space together. And so the experience is both sexual, erotic, tantric, as well as visionary and psychedelic. And we basically had an experience, and well, I can say for myself, I had a full Kundalini experience, full Kundalini awakening during this experience. And the sexual experience facilitated a deeper, shall I say, shamanic experience that changed my life. So basically, Matthew and I decided to create a tantric ritual together. We decided to have a sacred sexual ritual of union together. And we were really inspired by Penny Slinger's book on Tantra. And I think it's just called Sacred Sexuality. I don't exactly remember the title of it, but we had that book in our possession at that time, and I was really inspired by the use of sexuality as a means of attaining union with God and attaining transcendental visionary states of awakening, and also using sexuality as a way of merging with God through essentially deity worship and worshiping your lover or your partner as the divine, as God, as goddess. And so we essentially began the experience probably around 8 or 9 p.m. I'm not exactly sure what time we started, but it was in the evening. And he was an amazing cook, just phenomenal, mind-blowing cook. And so he made the most exquisite, decadent meal for us to share. It was like salmon and rice and vegetables and like some sort of special sauce and probably some wine. It was just like a gourmet, blissful meal. And we ate the meal, and we knew what we were going into. We created a ritual space, and we were going in this together. And so the meal was essentially the beginning of our entry into the ecstatic ultimate. And so after the meal, we dropped acid. And at that time, I had a very, very special cabin in the backyard that was my tantric temple, my sacred space for sacred sexuality. And it was a beautiful, beautiful cabin temple space. And we basically spent the rest of the night in there. The experience essentially began sometime in the evening after dinner, and we did not truly complete the experience until it was about 8 or 9 in the morning. So we basically went all night long. I'm guessing like almost 10 to 12 hours of a full-on mind-blowing experience. And so it began really beautifully and really gently. We went into the cabin. He started playing didgeridoo and drumming. I began dancing. I think we probably had a little bit of wine. I set aside a container of chocolates, a container of olives. We had wine. I wanted to have like a sensual feast, so that while we were having this ecstatic sexual experience, we would also have this sensual gourmet feast of snacks to feast upon. I had coconut oil set out, and so we basically completely just blissed out of our minds. And we began by just dancing and making music. We had cranked up some music and we were dancing around. And when the acid began to come on, I feel like the first thing that happened is I went out of the cabin and squatted on the ground. I probably was totally naked and peed on the ground. And I looked up at the sky, and everything became pixelated and colorful and cartoon-like. Fairies and pixies, everything was glowing. All of the stars were like pinpricks into the sky. Everything was fractalizing. Everything was getting super beautiful. And I was like totally giddy. Really excited. I ran back into the cabin, and that's when I noticed the first really distinctly remarkable thing. I was looking around the cabin. I was scanning around the cabin, and what I noticed, your typical usual light spectrum in an indoor space is just light, like you see here, just light. But that particular experience, and only in this particular experience, I actually saw a rainbow from the floor to the ceiling. The light was actually splitting into the rainbow. And so it was like purple was at the bottom and red was at the top, and there was the whole rainbow spectrum. And I saw it pretty much all night long. And especially for the very beginning of it, it was just really intense. And that's when I really began to kind of tap in and tune into, wow, this is getting interesting. And we hadn't even started having sex yet. This was just like the foyer of the experience. But we basically began making love. And we spent the majority of the night making love. And there was many things about this experience that made it unique from typical sex. It was not a typical sexual experience, not at all. It was a very transcendental, otherworldly sexual experience. There was many things about the experience that really stand out. The first thing is that Matthew really became a god man. He began to look like Krishna or something. He looked like the most beautiful, most drop dead gorgeous man I had ever laid eyes upon in my entire life. Like, he was so gorgeous, I just wanted to devour him. I was intoxicated being in his presence. I wanted to eat him up. And likewise, I could feel from him that he was seeing me as a total goddess. He was totally seeing me as an intoxicating embodiment of feminine divinity and just wanted to devour me. We were intoxicated by each other's presence, and the electricity between us was so strong. During the experience, something really special and magical happened. There's a lot of magical things that happened, but one of them was very physical. And that is that I began to feel as though my womb, my yoni, my vagina, my whole internal sexual realm had exploded from, like, just a seed to a huge glowing hot orb of like a fireball. It literally felt as though my yoni had been cranked up, like the oven had been cranked up to 500 degrees. I felt so turned on that it was literally as though there was this huge, ginormous ball of energy in my yoni, in that whole region. It was just exploding through the rest of my body. I didn't even have to be having sex to just be in an almost permanent orgasmic state. Even when we were not having sex, I would go and get water, for example, and I would feel as though my womb, my yoni, was this well of intense power and intense vitality and life force, and that I could use my vagina, my yoni, as my source of magic, and I could do any kind of power that I wanted with my yoni. I started meditating as I was getting water out of the faucet, and I started focusing all of my yoni energy on the water, and was just basically saying to myself, this water is completely pure, everything is just completely purified, and was just totally circulating my yoni energy with the water. And that kind of thing basically lasted all night long until we went to bed at like 8:30 or 9 in the morning. That was very unique. But during the actual experience of making love, there were some pretty profound moments. I began to experience an orgasmic state that lasted seemingly permanently. And it just, every single time he would move in me and thrust in me, it was just taking me one notch higher, one notch higher, one notch higher, one notch higher. It was just so overwhelming, so intense. And his cock really began to feel like a wand of light. The true meaning of the word lingam, the true meaning of Vajra. His cock was a true wand of light, and it felt as though his lingam was almost electrical. It had an electrical current to it. It was beyond physical. It was beyond flesh. There was electricity. It felt almost as though I was being electrocuted through my yoni, except it wasn't painful. It was like the most ecstatically pleasurable experience I'd ever experienced in my entire life. And we began kind of coming to these orgasmic states, like at the same moment, same time we were looking into each other's eyes and going into this intense state of like orgasmic ecstasy with each other. And during one of those moments where I'm basically having an orgasm and having all of this electricity, truly, like I felt like I was being ecstatically electrocuted from my vagina all the way up to the rest of my body. I opened my eyes and I looked down my body and I actually could see three-dimensional chakras. I could see all of my chakras, and they were all colorful, and they were all three-dimensional, and they were glowing and spinning like orbs in all of the different energy centers. That was pretty mind-blowing. But the moment after that, literally at the moment of climax, right after seeing the chakras, I took my attention up to the ceiling. I looked up and I saw a spirit, a Native American, like indigenous, truly indigenous spirit hovering above where we were making love. And at the moment of total orgasmic unity between he and I received what felt like a lightning bolt of like whack, Shaktipat, just bam, straight in through my whole body. And I experienced, the electrocution feeling, the chakras, the spirit hovering, the Shakti, literally all within one moment. It was so intense. And I was like pouring my heart out to him with so much love and so much devotion. But one of the other interesting things that I began to notice with him is that I was constantly seeing his divine self and then his demonic self. His divine self and then his demonic self. And then his divine self and then his demonic self. It was like watching God be an addict. And I got to witness this total intense, like overwhelming love and magnetism and attraction. Was like deeper and more intense and more profound than I'd ever experienced before in my entire life. And then moments later be completely repulsed. and have to like come back into my heart and breathe and really focus on just loving him. And then all of this love and magnetism and attraction and just awe, and then total revulsion. And it was going back and forth for a while, and it was rather confusing. And we had that experience. It lasted all night, and we continued to just make love and make love and make love and just be in this total state of ecstasy until like my vagina felt like it was going to explode. And I at a certain point I was just deeply fulfilled and so joyful. I could have been in that state forever, but I was also just totally fulfilled, just completely drunk and so saturated in such perfect harmonic bliss, and that I became done. I arrived at that moment of doneness, and I watched him continue to pleasure himself. And we were in that state of play and pray and visionary lovemaking until we finally crashed and crawled into bed at 8:30 or 9 in the morning. And even at the time that we finally came to completion and crawled into bed, I still felt like I could have made love to him for another 10 hours and could have just gone into further states of ecstasy. My yoni was just glowing diamond of heat, and it felt like immortality in my body. And when I woke up the next afternoon, I probably only got a few hours of sleep, when I finally came back up, I was just mind blown. I couldn't believe what had happened. It was so much more profound and more amazing than any sexual experience I'd ever had in my entire life. And frankly, I've never had another sexual experience in my entire life, before or since then, that has ever matched the depth of that one singular experience. And for that, I give so much gratitude, because it was so sacred and so special. And yeah, so I just wanted to share that story with you. I hope that you enjoyed and are inspired, and thank you for listening to another one of my visionary stories. This is Wahkeena Sitka, and sending so much gratitude and aloha.